watching NotesIn9.
Hello, and welcome to Notes9. I'm David Leedy. Episode 82, XPages Keyboard Accessibility Tip. The more, the merrier. Okay, this show is about accessibility, and the most important thing that I can say about accessibility is it's important. There's a lot of people in the world with various challenges. Maybe it's moving their hands, maybe they've got very poor vision, whatever the challenge is, you want to try to make your apps as accessible to your audience and the users of your apps as possible. In some cases, maybe there's a legal requirement. In some cases, it might just be moral. But it's not something you want to overlook. I know I've at least attempted to try and get subtitles on to Notes9, and I've done some work with its transcription service for hearing impaired people and things like that. And I haven't gotten finished with that, and because of lack of time, but that is kind of still on my radar and a goal of something I want to do. So it could be a video that you want to make more accessible, or your site, maybe there's a right to left language, as opposed to left to right language, which One UI is pretty good at, handling that kind of stuff. I think Dojo as a framework is a little better for accessibility than jQuery typically is, but I could be wrong on that. That's just an impression. So it's an important topic that you don't want to miss out on, and it's what my new contributor is going to discuss, and I'm very excited to have this new contributor on. He's from this little company called IBM. And his name is Michael Stewart. And Michael's an advisory software engineer. And I don't know exactly what that means, but he works on documentations and wikis for the Lotus and WebSphere products. And documentation and wikis is all about sharing knowledge, and I'm obviously a big fan of that. So I believe he's one of the developers in that arena. He's got a Twitter account at IBM Social Biz UX for user experience. And there's some Facebook and connections pages, links there too. And he's also a Red Sox fan. And I happen to live near Philadelphia, so there's nothing for me to be excited about. But I know the Red Sox has a big popular following. I know Tim Clark from the XCast podcast is a big Red Sox fan, so go Sox. So with that being said, let's go to the demo where Michael is going to walk us through a tip on making a typical X-Page scenario be more keyboard friendly and less mouse dependent.
Hi, I'm Mike Stewart. I'm a software developer at IBM, and today I'd like to show you a tip about making XPages accessible in the browser for keyboard users. This tip helps you ensure that keyboard users can correctly tab through input elements on an XPage in a browser. And I'm specifically talking about the case where a choice in one control, such as a set of radio buttons, updates a following control, like a list box. Now you can use a full or partial page refresh in the first controls on key press event to do that, but the result, when you're talking about tabbing, may not be quite what you expect. So take a look at this simple web page. It contains two radio buttons followed by a list box. And right now the personal radio button is selected and the list box values reflect that choice. The values in the list box change depending on which button the user clicks. Now with the keyboard, you can also use the left and right arrow keys to move between the buttons. Pressing space updates the values in the list box. Well, let's see what happens when the user makes a radio button selection and then tabs to the list box. Left arrow, space, tab. And as you can tell by the dotted outline in the list box, the focus shifts appropriately and the user can make a selection in the list box, like that. And so far, that's great. That's what you want to have happen. But let's see what happens when we try to use the other radio button. I'll tab back up to the radio buttons. Right arrow, space, and now let's tab. And something odd happens. As you can see, focus shifted momentarily to the list box and then moved away. Pressing tab at this point returns focus to the radio button, not the list box. And no matter how many times the user presses tab, focus never remains on the list box. How can we fix this? Well, let's look at the code in Designer. Here's the simple custom control which I added to the XPage that we were just looking at in the browser. So the radio buttons are bound to scoped variables, as you can see in the Properties tab at the bottom of the screen. And the list box is populated with an array of values that change depending on which button is selected. Let me just show you that. Okay, so when a button is selected, its variable value is set, and the array of list box values is updated to reflect that variable value, and then the list box is refreshed. So let's look at the events associated with the radio buttons. Let's look at the problem one first. That's the business button. Go to the Events tab. So you can see that the on-click event just does a partial update of the list box, and the on key press does the same thing. So that means that whenever any key is pressed, including the tab key, the partial refresh occurs, and that prevents the focus from shifting to the list box. All right, now let's look at the personal button. So this one works the same way as the business button, with the addition of some client-side code in the on key press event. And this code simply says return false if the key code is the tab code. That's 9. Now, if the client code returns true, then the server-side code executes and the partial refresh occurs. If it returns false, the server-side code doesn't execute and there's no partial refresh. No partial refresh means the tabbing doesn't start over, so the tab key can work the way it should and move focus to the list box. You could probably also extend this code to prevent other keys from causing the partial refresh. You might want to have something that, really just says the only key press that matters is the space key, which is what you select a radio button value with when you're using the keyboard. So we're not going to do that here. That's kind of beyond the scope. But we can fix the business radio button to work the way the personal one does. And all we need to do is to copy the client-side code, go over to the business button, down to on key press, and now we want to go into the client tab, script editor, and we'll just paste this in here. And then we'll save, and we'll see what happens in the browser. Okay, back in the browser, I'm going to refresh the page and then we'll see what happens. All right, now let's move focus to the business button. Right arrow over, and we're going to press space, and now we'll press tab. And yay, the focus remains on the list box, and the user can make a selection just like you would want to have happen. Okay, that's it for this tip. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you find it useful, and happy programming. Bye-bye.
And that's the demo. If you have any questions for me, here's my contact information, and I thank you for your time.